Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Cruse Avenue Vision presentation. We are discussing a refined vision based on input that we had received previously through a similar virtual open house process back in May. I am Adam Hughes. I'm with Better City. We're a municipal consulting firm. And with me on the line tonight is my colleague Ryan England. And we also have with us Mike Dowling from Dowling Architects, who will go through the visioning and the visuals associated with the Cruse Avenue vision. I'll cover an introduction to this process and scope of work overview, as well as instructions for participating in tonight's meeting. And then I'll turn the time over to Mike and he'll go through the sketches that he's put together of the Cruse Avenue vision. So Cruse Avenue was identified as an opportunity in the downtown plan that was conducted a few years ago, recognizing that the purpose for Cruse as a arterial road for a planned highway intersection as part of the Model Cities program that had never materialized, required a closer look at what Cruse could be re-envisioned as. And the city had issued an RFP late last year for conducting a Cruse Avenue vision and selected the team of Better City and Dowling Architects to conduct the scope of work. The scope includes Cruse Avenue from the intersection of Park Avenue up to Lawrence Street. And our work commenced in March of 2020, which included a review of prior plans, very robust and engaged stakeholder interviews over the course of a few weeks, and the development of some preliminary alternatives, which we then presented at virtual open houses conducted on May 26th, 27th, and 28th. We conducted 5 meetings during those 3 dates. From the input that was received from those virtual open houses, we created a refined Cruse Avenue vision that Mike will be presenting here shortly, and also a document that is available on the city's website, going through the scope of work components that I've just described. Tonight's meeting is one of 2. We'll also be presenting tomorrow at 2 o'clock to 3:30. And this refined Cruse Avenue vision will also be presented to the City Council at a future meeting to be scheduled. And subsequent to receiving the City Council feedback, the vision will be made final. The purpose of our meetings tonight and tomorrow is to solicit additional public input on these refined visualizations. And public comment input will be continued to be received up until the final vision is presented to City Council. We do encourage that all comments be provided sooner rather than later so they could be addressed and incorporated. In terms of instructions for tonight's meeting, this Zoom meeting is being moderated by Stephanie Reinhardt with the City of Helena. Comments and questions can be made through the chat function and will be monitored by Mike McConnell with the city. And myself and Mike will periodically review those submitted comments and address those throughout the presentation. So in the prior virtual open houses and based off of the stakeholder interviews and the work that we had conducted, there were 3 alternatives that were proposed. The first one was to improve active transportation, including pedestrian and bicycle access, while maintaining vehicular access along Cruse Avenue for the corridor between Park and Lawrence. Which entails adjusting the right-of-way and making improvements for those active transportation investments. Alternative 2 was more of an extreme alternative, which dedicated Cruse really for active transportation while mostly eliminating vehicular access. And alternative 3 was a combination of alternatives 1 and 2, where we had vehicular access along certain stretches of Cruse, and then it was mostly eliminated on other sections. The feedback that we had gotten from the virtual open houses was very instructive and really helped guide us in refining alternative 1. There was consistent support for alternative 1 with concerns regarding parking, neighborhood center relocation, and the design of new residential product that had been presented along Cruse Avenue. There wasn't support really for alternative 2 or 3. The public really wanted to maintain vehicular access because of the convenience in getting to downtown, and really viewed any alternative that would eliminate vehicular access as being impactful to surrounding neighborhoods and to businesses. So with that, we really zeroed in on alternative 1. Mike has done a really great job in analyzing what the impact on parking is going to have with these planned improvements. And we've also advanced some discussions with the tenants at the neighborhood center, and we think we've identified some options there that Mike will present here shortly. So the refined vision was to consider the neighborhood center relocation with 2 options. One was just to leave it in place and create and enhance some circulation and connectivity between the walking mall and Cruse Avenue. Or another option is to just relocate it on site to a newly constructed facility, which Mike will show in his sketch. Demolish the old facility and make way for additional circulation, access, and open space. A parking survey and analysis was also conducted in June that showed 25% utilization of parking lots that would be impacted by the proposed improvements, and a net change when you take into consideration the parking spaces that would be lost and the parking spaces that would be gained as part of the improvements, as only taking away 9 parking spaces. So it felt like we addressed the parking concerns there in doing that survey and analysis. So with that, what we'd like to do is turn the time over to Mike Dowling, and he can walk through the alternative 1 with the 2 options regarding the neighborhood center, and also show, I think, some of the improvements that have been made over the prior plan. So with that, I will end my screen share.
Thanks, Adam. And I will start a new screen share. If anybody has any chat questions initially, certainly can do that.
None so far, Mike.
Okay. Okay. So again, the project area starts down here where Cruse Avenue meets Park and continues over to Lawrence Street. And so consistent with the plans we had shown before, there's 2 sections shown, the section from Park to Broadway, and then a section from Broadway to Lawrence. So refined sketch, very similar to what we had shown before, just sort of looking at details a little bit. This solution, the first option here, and the options only exist between Park and Broadway and are really specific, as Adam mentioned, to the neighborhood center. But starting here at Park, we do have a remnant of a small park space at the sort of branch widened intersection that exists now. Now we're showing housing again down here on Cruse, adjacent to the claim stake apartments. You know, a couple of just references. All of the red you see are new rooftops. So they'd either be housing or new buildings. For example, the one for the neighborhood center here, and then a new building for Helena Housing Authority shown here. Alongside the street, we've got a consistent bike lane, which is adjacent to the street. And then off of the street is the pedestrian pathway, which meanders slightly, but is mostly fairly straight, going from one end to the other. The street section is basically a 40-foot wide street section, which includes parking on both sides of the street, parallel parking, and then two 12-foot drive lanes. And then next to the parking, in this case on the south side, sort of east side, is a bike lane, which would be down at street level, separated from the parking by a curb, and then a grassy area that separates the pedestrian sidewalk from the bike lane. So the housing, townhouse style units, we're showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 down here. The location of the new neighborhood center building in this solution would be a multi-story building that would have direct access off of Cruse Avenue. I'm guessing it would probably be about 3 stories to make this happen. And then down at the lowest level, you would have direct access to the walking mall and sort of this walking mall extension that comes up to sort of an enhanced concrete decorative circle where the bridge underpass is, and some overlook areas and seating areas that would look down into the park. We are showing a new building in some of the vacated right-of-way for Helena Housing Authority on this site as well. And then the remainder of it is fairly consistent to what was shown before. So the only difference between this one and the previous one I showed is just leaving the neighborhood center and the parking lot as it exists. And what I'm showing is a widened pedestrian pathway that would take people from Cruse Avenue alongside this drive entrance into the neighborhood center parking lot. And there's an existing walkway that actually comes down and connects to the park. But there actually is no sidewalk that connects from there up to Cruse Avenue. So we'd probably try to envision a 10-foot wide sidewalk that could be improved and be a little bit more substantial than just a footpath. And then from Broadway to Lawrence, really haven't changed too much here. Just checking some dimensions. Got housing shown in the old lot 6. And we've got a couple 5 units that take up a few of the parking spaces in what is lot 4, which is above the Jackson Street garage. And then 5 units in the Chamber lot as well. And so it creates this sort of neighborhood of townhouses that have access to the sidewalks and along Cruse. Same as before, there's just showing a new building on the Helena Independent Record empty parking lot. Got access, showing access and connectivity down to the walking mall. This is Constitution Park here. And then part of this exists. There's actually over here a sidewalk that comes down and connects from Cruse. And the thought here is to turn this alley into a sort of a continuation of the landscaping and pedestrian walkway. Then crosses Jackson Street and finds its way down to the mall. And then lastly, as we get over to Lawrence, the possibility of taking up some of the parking in the Burt Ernie's parking lot across from the Holter Museum and putting a new commercial structure that might be retail, office, residential. So then combined, we have the solution with the new neighborhood center. The solution with the existing neighborhood center. So then the next thing that's new that we're starting to look at and generate some images of what some of this might look like. And so the first image I've started to generate is taken as if I was standing right here where my cursor is and looking directly south and kind of focusing on these residential units that would be located in lot 6, and also looking at what the bike lane, street trees, and the pedestrian walkway might look like. So here we can see what that street profile might look like. We've got our 40-foot wide zone, which would be parking, 2 drive lanes, and then parking on the other side. There would be a raised curb that separates the bike lane from the street. But this would actually be down at street level, so this would be a continuation of the asphalt until we got over to a standard curb and then a typical sort of boulevard street section with a 8-foot wide street trees. It would actually be wider in many instances, sidewalk, and then we can start to see the image of row house or townhouse style housing along the street. This image is in development, and what we'll be doing is creating several more that show some of the other locations and what things are looking like and how these views might be enhanced. And the last slide I have is, and we can go into this in more detail, but what I did is I actually went at various times of the day and did a parking analysis of all the affected areas. So on the left-hand side, we've got the section of the street itself from Lawrence to 6th, and then 6th to Broadway, and then Broadway to Park. And the current spaces that exist in those blocks, 49 from Lawrence to 6th, 62 from 6th to Broadway, and 58 from Broadway to Park. And then how many would exist in the new? So this column here is the new solution. We gain 1 in the area from Lawrence to 6th. We lose a few on 6th to Broadway. And then from Broadway to Park, we gain 2.5 times as many as there are right now. So then the next column to the right was just a physical count that I did on these dates at these times, and I tried to have staggered times that would represent afternoon parking, morning parking, and then around noon. And in each of those sections respectively, there were 22 spaces being utilized, 12 and 9. And then the utilization factor is the percentages here, 45% of the spaces from Lawrence to 6th, which makes sense, it's closer to downtown. And then it drops to 19% from 6th to Broadway. And then even less, Broadway to Park is 16%. On June 19th at 10:10 in the morning, the numbers are shown here. And then on June 23rd, during the lunch hour, the numbers are shown there. And then the lots themselves, lot 6 is the one that we would just be eliminating and turning into housing. Lot 5 is the chamber lot. Lot 10 is the lot behind Bert and Ernie's. And then Lot 4 is the upper Jackson Street deck lot along Cruse. Current number of spaces again, spaces being proposed in the new solution. And I didn't count all of these at the same time because I was realizing I needed to add some of these in here, but lot 6, for example, out of the 36 spaces that are there, 6 were being utilized on June 18th, 5 were being utilized on June 19th, 4 were being utilized on June 23rd. So clearly that lot, during the day anyway, doesn't get much use. The chamber lot, I only counted 1 day, but it was using 7 spaces out of the 57. And then lot 4, I counted on 2 days. It's actually the best utilization of all of them, where 41 spaces were being used. And a lot of these are permanently parked, I think, fleet vehicles that sit there most of the day and get utilized on occasion. I know Montana Department of Transportation has some that are just sort of home there. So this count did change from the early numbers that I had given to Adam that he put in his presentation, which showed a reduction of 9 spaces. We actually are dropping 52 total. But with utilization rates being as low as they are, it shouldn't have any negative impact on the area. So that is the end of the slides that I was going to show. I will leave these up and we can come back to them if there's any comments or thoughts.
Mike, there was a question from Kathy Marks about the parking for the neighborhood center. Should a new facility go within their existing parking lot? Could you address that briefly?
Yep. It would be under the building in this scenario. So there's a few that would remain, could be on either side of the access lane that comes down. But in this solution, it's anticipated that it would be structured parking underneath the building.
And then Mike, with the neighborhood center remaining where it is, would that impact any of their existing parking?
No, there wouldn't be any reduction in parking. There would be a, this is where the section of Cruse Avenue actually gains the most parking up here. So there would actually be increased parking significantly along Cruse. And it would remain the same at the neighborhood center.
Great, Mike. John Kilgore has a question as well. I'm just going to read it right from chat. If I understand correctly, the plan is to retain on-street parking on both sides of Cruse Avenue. Is it necessary to keep that much parking on Cruse Avenue rather than having a wider pedestrian/bike area?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that's something that we definitely can pursue, especially in areas like, for example, here where, you know, the utilization of on-street parking is sort of heavy in certain areas, but certainly very light in others. I think where we have residential units, that on-street parking will definitely get used as the parking. I mean, it could be tuck under parking, for example, here that comes in behind these units, but they would definitely use those on-street parking. But there's some areas like where the parkland area is where it might make a lot of sense to not have the parallel parking on the street and have, although we have plenty of space for landscaping and everything along this area. That is a good question. I think that's something we can look at and see where it makes sense to possibly enhance the width of the bike lane and or walkways.
Okay, Kathy Marks had a follow-up question. commented that the counting was done during the pandemic, and do you expect changes when everyone is back in business and out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I thought about that a lot. I don't know. I really don't have any way of knowing what the impact of the pandemic would have. I'm certain it's reduced parking some. But I will say, when I looked at, for example, you know, we stopped here at Lawrence Street. The parking between Lawrence and Mini Malfunction Junction, that one block is very heavily utilized, even today. So I think that's something that we'd want to continue to probably monitor. The other thing I wanted to do was an evening count to see if there's hot spots in parking. I know, for example, the Lot 6 does get some use from patrons who go to On Broadway in the evenings. But there is quite a bit of parking in that area with the huge parking lot across the street as well.
Yeah, and I think to just add to what you've said, Mike, you know, our deliverable recognizes the fact that what we've done has been during this really strange environment, and recommended that, you know, when things start stabilizing, that the city do consider going out and doing a parking survey and seeing how things have changed.
And I apologize, while I'm screen sharing, I can't see the chats. So I appreciate, Mike, you reading those out loud.
Mike, there is also, this isn't one that is in the chat, but it is a comment that we received via email. And there was some concern regarding the chamber building losing some parking, and how they would accommodate buses. I believe Kathy Burwell mentioned that they have buses there fairly regularly. Has there been any thought to how that might be accommodated with the loss of parking and the entrance?
Well, I guess my thought would be buses can certainly park along the street. There's plenty of room, and we could have designated longer bus or RV parking spaces in front of the chamber building. I don't know that they have to go into the parking lot itself to do that. That lot, the utilization that I've been documenting is very low, about 10 or 11%, and similar to the lot across the street, several of them are just sort of long-term parking commission vehicles and things like that don't necessarily have to be in that lot. So yeah, I understand Kathy's concern. It's not inconsistent with other concerns in areas where parking is going to be diminished a little bit. But the reality is that the utilization is just very low. The highest utilized lot is lot 4. And so if we were going to possibly eliminate one of these options where housing would go, you know, I would think it would make more sense to eliminate the one shown in lot 4 due to its use and proximity that's closer to the downtown.
Are there any other questions or comments that anyone wants to put forth? Okay, Mike. John Kilgore had a follow-up comment. I know it's hard to assess parking needs right now. I would be in favor of reducing parking as much as possible, which would improve the street aesthetically and probably also a better experience for pedestrians, cyclists, etc.
Yeah, duly noted. I don't disagree.
Yeah, I would just comment a little bit on that, and that is, we're trying to balance, the needs of a number of different stakeholders within the community, businesses and those that rely on Cruse for complementary parking to, whatever other parking that they might have, and those that find parking along Cruse as being very convenient for them, to activating it for recreation and active transportation. And we felt like this was a good kind of balance between those two demands and stakeholder groups.
Yeah, that's a good comment, Adam. There's somebody out there who probably feels just as strongly that, we shouldn't diminish the parking at all. So it is always trying to strike that balance in the areas where it's definitely critical.
Mike, Kathy Marks had another question. If you could zoom into 6th Avenue and Cruse, her comment is a little bit of park added to the northwest corner of 6th and Cruse. Is a building being torn down? I'm not sure.
So northwest would be this corner. Northeast would be this corner. Nothing torn down on the northwest corner. The northeast corner, there is a very small building located right here, and I don't know what the owners are planning on doing with that, whether they're planning on keeping it or taking it down to put up a new structure. But
she said yes, the northwest corner, I think that is exactly what she's talking about right there, and that would not affect any current structures.
No, it would not.
Okay. Let's see. Sharon has a comment. What do you see as the biggest challenges for implementing this plan?
I'll defer to Adam on that one.
I think the biggest challenges associated with the implementation is just, I think, going through the process of allocating funding to the improvements and understanding that this is going to be a project that's going to take a number of years to implement, and having patience as the vision unfolds and improvements are being made along the corridor. There are transportation programs that are available. TAP is one that provides funding for active transportation improvements that could be utilized, but the funding is competitive. And it's available every year. So it's something that, if the community really wants to get behind this vision and execute it, they could do it in a number of phases over a period of time. I think the other thing is just understanding that we really need to be sensitive of not overburdening the development costs for these projects. That our intent here is to provide housing that's attainable and that can be utilized by workforce within the community, and to burden these projects with infrastructure costs, I think, is going to require an increase in the asking price for these particular projects. So finding the right balance between public and private sector investment is going to be critical in order to make these successful and target the demographic that's desired. The other thing I would say is that what we're really excited about is trying to create win-win situations for all the different stakeholder groups that have been involved in this process, from those that have been clamoring for new residential product that is attainable, trying to meet those needs, for those that have facilities that may be inadequate for their use, and being able to accommodate their programming and services, which are vital to the community, and hopefully engaging in a broader community discussion about the neighborhood center and looking for ways in which to finance a new facility there that could enhance those services and programming, I think will be a discussion that needs to advance and will be a difficult part of the implementation, but I think one that is very much needed and could really enhance the overall feel, aesthetic, and connectivity of this plan. So I'd say moving forward, that should be a prioritized discussion and looking at ways in which partnerships could be formed and financing could be allocated to move that concept and project forward. So those are the major, I think, impediments, or I wouldn't even say impediments, but some of the major considerations looking forward as the city looks to implement this vision.
You know, I would just add, Adam, that if it took longer to figure out a way to build a new neighborhood center, I think this plan could be implemented in the solution where it stays where it is existing. And then as a part of the new neighborhood center, the extension of the walking mall and the expanded park space could all be a part of that as a single project. So it's not that necessarily it's one or the other. It could be done in phases, where the first phase is the Cruse Avenue reconstruction, and then as funds are found and a way to implement a new neighborhood center, that happens by itself.
That's a great point, Mike. I hadn't thought of that. That's great.
Adam, one thing I'd like to add is that one of the goals of this project was to increase that connectivity between the neighborhoods to the east and downtown, and Cruse was seen as an impediment to that effort. And I think that this plan has gone a long way and done a good job in addressing at least partially that issue. So good job.
I won't take credit for that. That's all been Mike. So great job, Mike. I think just in follow up to that, we would hope that this would spur additional efforts and initiatives in those neighborhoods that are to the east and west, and you know, extending the connectivity up through those neighborhoods and making those types of improvements to make the permeability of Cruse Avenue, you know, more conducive to pedestrian and bicycle access, and thereby increasing vibrancy in the downtown and safety, improving safety as well.
Sure, and I think this plan will dovetail nicely with the extension of the downtown area to Rodney Street as well. So hopefully there can be some good synergy there. I don't see any additional comments. I'm just going back through to make sure I didn't miss any. No, I don't believe so. Actually, Mike, if you could address one of the comments in the prior meetings was the connection from the park space to the south, and the name of the park escapes me, but at Cruse and Park, yes, right there, there's a trail connection. Is that, looks like a bench there, is that where that trail would come in?
It is, and I think we'd probably, you know, the drive access to the back of these units does impact that slightly. And so I think in the refinement of a solution, we'd either want to find an alternative spur for that trailhead or just not provide access to the back of these units, and they would access them from the front or something. We may be able to narrow these up as well. I'm showing them as being a fairly deep unit and skinny, and if this grouping was a little bit wider and shorter, we could solve that problem and not affect it at all.
Okay, great. Looks like Tim Nickerson from our parking division has a question. How will traffic go in and out of the second floor of the Jackson garage if Breckenridge next to the Shriners is eliminated to vehicles?
So as I understand, I think the access to the second level, and I could be wrong, I think it's a two-level deck. You've got the lower level off Jackson here, and the upper level here would be accessed off of Cruse. I don't think there's an intermediate level, but I could be wrong. I don't know, Tim, if you can shed some light on that.
He says that, let's see, each floor is independent.
Correct.
So Tim, it's only a two-story garage, correct? Oh, he says it's 3 stories, so I guess it's the middle story that he is referring to. 3-story each floor having its own exit and entry.
In that scenario, we wouldn't be able to close this off. We'd have to maintain access, either coming down from accessing it from Cruse or below. I'll have to adjust that in the final solution. It's a good comment.
Yeah, thank you for your comment, Nick. Tim, rather. Okay, are there any other comments or questions that you have for Mike or Adam?
Hi, my name is Greg Worth. I live at 501 State Street, and I'd also support eliminating parking where needed, and if it's certainly been seldomly being used. It's been some of my observations as well. The southern part of Cruse Avenue is very seldomly used for parking, and if that can be captured, that would be beneficial. And maybe even in the, I understand there's different property ownership, but the large parking area south of the Park Avenue building, if that could be captured somehow and incorporated into some Cruse Avenue revisioning, I think that would help the area as well. But thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Christy Panozzo, our Parks Director, has a question as well. She's wondering about a connection to Fire Tower Park.
So what I would envision actually is in the redevelopment of the pedestrian walkways in that area. We'd have to study this a little bit. I walked up to the fire tower climbing the loose rocks in this area, and it is pretty treacherous. But I think part of the solution could be to create some steps and at least get an improved access up to the point where the trail system actually functions fairly well. So I do see that as being something we would want to do as a part of this project. I'm also showing it at the other end, possibility of putting some stairs over here up to a point where it's a fairly manageable walk along the existing park and over to the fire tower itself.
Okay, I don't see anyone else having questions, comments, no hands raised. Do you guys have any final thoughts or parting thoughts about what you've heard tonight, next steps, or anything of that nature?
No, I just want to thank everyone for their participation. This has been really helpful. We wouldn't have been able to get to the point where we are now without the stakeholders and the public being engaged in this process. And we were really pleased to see just the passion and excitement that the residents and citizens of Helena have for their downtown and for Cruse Avenue. And we hope that this is reflective of their goals and objectives and what they'd like to see here. Again, striking a balance among all the different stakeholder groups. So thank you everyone for your participation and passion for the community. The next steps are we're going to take these sketches, and Mike will finalize them. We'll incorporate those into our document that we've provided, strengthen up some of the descriptive verbiage around those and the logic behind the different design components, and then look to incorporate any input from this meeting, obviously, and make the changes that have been brought up, particularly with the parking garage and access to that, and presenting at some point in the near future to the City Council, and looking to finalize the document shortly thereafter. So those would be the next steps, and thank you everyone for participating. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
I'd also like to add that the first draft is on our website. If you go to helenamt.gov and the community development page under current projects, you can read the draft, see the visuals. My email address is there, so if you have any comments or any questions, feel free to let me know and we can work through those as they come in. So thanks everyone for taking the time tonight. We really appreciate it, and we will be posting on social media and email blasting as well when we have other documents to present. So thank you everyone.
So Mike, also we have another one meeting tomorrow, so people can invite their friends.
That's right. You mentioned that, Sharon.
All right, well, thank you everyone.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.